Hello there, my name is Alan O'Neill. I'm a change management consultant, a speaker, an author, and recently a podcaster. For more than 30 years, I've been doing lots of research and writing and consulting and speaking. I've authored 5 books on my particular topic areas. For more than 30 years, I've been privileged to work with some of the most amazing organizations around the world, right across industry, from B2B, B2C, every sector that you can imagine, I've worked with them at some stage. Now, you might be curious to know, what is it that makes them all so successful within their own respective fields? Well, from my research and from my work, I've identified a core framework that I call the 7 steps to profit. This is a very structured path to excellence that the best brands in the world follow. Now, it's the obvious steps that you can imagine, through working through North Star, culture, strategy, people, customer, and so on. But of course, the steps seem like common sense, but we all know that common sense is not always common practice. And that's where I come in supporting organizations to fine-tune, to refresh, to really bring to a level of excellence those parts of the business that they need to work on. It all, of course, means change. Now, specifically, my topics when speaking cover some core areas. One of them is change management. Another is culture, customer experience, and of course, people. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about each one of those in turn, starting with change management. I've got a particular view on change management after 30 years, and to my mind, change management breaks down under 2 headings. One is around the psychological aspect of change management, how to help people to overcome resistance, that natural resistance to change. But the other is the process of how an organization should actually travel through that change journey. So when I'm speaking at events, I always like to focus in on bringing empathy and understanding to the audience, because after all, I don't think people deliberately obstruct change. Sometimes that's a reality that some people are resisting change, and we as leaders need to find a way to get over that. But to my mind, that starts with empathy. What I mean by that is, let's try to understand why people resist change and the types of people that resist change. And I classify them under 3 headings. One is speedy. And I see speedy as that character who embraces change very readily. They jump on the bus really quickly and actually will lead the change on your behalf. Another character is, let's call them harmony. Harmony is that person who at first may seem like resisting the change, but then when it is cajoled and brought on the journey and the context is shown to them, they then usually do come along. The third category, however, let's call that person comfy. And you know where I'm going with this one. Comfy is that person who deliberately, perhaps, or overtly or covertly resists change. And they're the more difficult character to bring along because they can be quite obstructive with any change program. And that's hard for us as leaders. But let's try to understand the comfy and why people resist change. And that brings me on to some psychological research that I've done around this area. One aspect of resistance is to do with uncertainty. When people don't know what the change is all about or what's coming down the tracks, and that uncertainty beds in, so that puts a comfort blanket around them, that look of resistance. Or it could be experiential. It may be in the past that consultants are brought in and then changes are made, and maybe that person lost their job or lost their position, or maybe their father or brother lost their job in a major change program. And that uncertainty can cause that, and that experiences can cause that resistance. But there are also some other reasons, more to do with wiring, and going back to our age-old millennia, in fact. We all have an amygdala in the brain, and that amygdala is that part of the brain that detects danger. And of course, when change comes and it seems like it's dangerous, that can cause a person to close in on themselves and resist that change. And let's understand that for what it is, because it is down to the genetics. Some people have a natural disposition towards anxiety, others to risk aversion. And these things we don't know. People don't wear badges to say how they feel about change. So we're trying to read their behavior. And my advice is to any organization, assume this is a reality for everybody, and then therefore do something about it as you travel through your change journey. And that's where I'd like to bring you to the process of change. And I've classified this under what I call the 4 Ds of change management. And this is in my book, show me the lid on the box. The 4Ds are discover, try to get under the hood of what is causing this change in the first place, and what is it that you need to understand, what's the burning platform for this change. Moving on then is design. So designing the change program by bringing the right people into the room. Remember, with any change program, you've got to win hearts and minds. So how do you do that? You bring them in at the planning stage to help them to understand the context and why this change needs to happen. That then moves on to delivering the change in a very structured and coordinated way. But of course then the develop part of change is around not letting your organization or your people return to the old way. You've got to bed in those changes, whatever they might be, and make them really part of your culture and your way of doing things. Selfridges is a case in point. I was very lucky to work with Selfridges for quite a number of years as their external consultant. And we went through the complete 7 steps to profit in helping them to significantly change everything that they do. It was taken over by a Canadian-Irish family at the time. They've since sold it, actually. But when I was brought in as the external consultant, it was to support a significant change agenda, which touched on every one of the elements of the 7 steps. But change was a big part of that, and winning hearts and minds and making people feel that they're part of something fantastic. So inclusion, communications were absolutely critical. It turned out to be a tremendous success story, because in the space of 8 years, we grew profit from £45 million to almost £200 million. Quite extraordinary for the times that were in it, and particularly with retail going through so much change. I'd like to move on to another topic that I speak quite a lot on, which is customer service. And again, I'm going to show one of my models around customer service, and that is a 3-legged stool. Whether you're B2B or B2C, the 3-legged stool framework will work for you. What I'm saying here is that every customer judges you on 3 elements: product, people, and place. Not just on one, not just on great product, because here's the thing. The days of differentiating on product alone are just gone, unless you've got the most incredible new product that nobody else can touch you or compete on. But most of us are in the boat where our products can be copied or are already available from other suppliers. So how do you differentiate then in that world? I believe it's through customer experience. But customer experience, the definition of that, you ask 100 people to define customer experience, you'll get 100 different answers. So to bring that to a kind of a structured approach, my 3-legged stool will help you to do that. Because this is about helping people in the front line to understand their role. So from the boardroom to the front line, of course, customer experience is impacted and should touch everybody. Everybody has a role, but to bring it to a really strong way of communicating it, use the 3-legged stool. Here's an example of a client we worked with called LC Packaging. LC Packaging is a distributor and manufacturer of packaging for onions, for tomatoes, for potatoes, and so on. You can't imagine anything more commoditized, can you? And they were under huge pressure from very, very large multinationals with very deep pockets who could come in at lower prices. So LC Packaging were under huge pressure for pricing, for selling at a price that matched the big guys. And that was impacting on their margin because they didn't have the buying power that the big guys had. So what did we do? We actually went out and talked to some of their customers, farmers in this case, and listened to them to understand what their needs were. And bizarrely, their needs were beyond just pricing. And by focusing then the whole organization in a different way, putting customer experience at the heart of everything that they do, their sales went back up again. And they were getting premium pricing for a like-for-like product based on the customer experience that they were able to give, which is especially around supply chain. Let me move on to another topic, which is culture. Now, culture, you know the expression, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, yes, it does. But again, culture to me is that all-pervasive aspect of an organization, like the software, like the Windows software that drives your laptop, that without it, you can't you can't do your work on your computer. Culture is like that. Many organizations focus on strategy and other things, but they forget about the importance of culture, which is all about behaviors. It's all about how people interact and work with each other. Once again, if you asked 100 people to define culture, you'd get 100 different answers. So I'd like you to introduce you to my language around culture that will help you to think about your culture today, what is it and what should it be. So here you have a typical X and Y matrix. So on the horizontal line you have the speed line, organizations on the right hand side that are very fast moving, and those on the left hand side that are somewhat slower moving. And then on the vertical axis you have on the top half people centricity, and on the bottom half task focused, operations focused in other words. Of course, those all meet then in 4 quadrants, which I call kindred, avant-garde, action focused and regimented. Now your organization has a culture. Even if you haven't measured it, it sits in this matrix somewhere. For example, top right hand corner is avant-garde, very fast moving, people centric, typical of entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial organizations, fashion companies, tech companies and so on. Bottom right hand corner is what I call the action focused organizations. Fast moving, yes, but also very task and operations focused. Very typical of large multinationals, very typical of manufacturing companies, very typical of large big box retail, food companies and so on. But the bottom left hand corner is what I call regimented. Regimented is that slow moving, resistance to change, very conservative, staying within a comfort zone. You'll hear words like, oh, we've always done it this way. Well, also quite bureaucratic in their systems and processes. I'm going to say typical in financial services, in banking, in aviation, in military, of course. Top left-hand corner is what I call the kindred culture. Kindred is where we're all in it together, somewhat slow moving also, but people-centric for sure. Typical in hospitality, typical in education, and civil public sector would be either top or bottom on that left-hand side. Now the question for you is, where is your culture? And then of course the next big question is, where should your culture be? What should your culture, in terms of delivering on your ambition, your North Star, step 1 on my 7 steps, what's the right culture? Get that right and you can take on the world. Get that right and nobody can copy your culture. They can copy your strategy, but not your culture. Landbell is a client of mine who are a German-based organization in the recycling world. They've made several acquisitions over the years. One of the big acquisitions they made was ERP recycling. Now, when they bought ERP was quite a sizable organization in its own right, as was Landbell. Merging the two was a challenge. So they brought me in as a speaker at one of their management conferences, and I spoke about change and culture. On the back of that then, Landbell CEO invited me to support them on a significant culture refresh program. What did we do? We worked through both cultures in terms of Landbell's culture and ERP culture. We identified the best of both and then merged the two together in a new culture. They were really trying hard to merge the two organizations in terms of strategy and the services that they were offering their customers, cross-selling and so on. And yes, it was working, but then it worked even better once we identified the culture that was required to deliver on that. And we went to work on that and it was quite a success. It's still going on to this day. Now, let me move on to another topic, which is leadership. And my most recent, second last book actually is The Leader's Six-Pack. Now, what I'm getting at here is that leadership has changed since COVID. And new priorities have taken over, and it's getting that balance between grit and grace. What do I mean by grace? I'm talking here about emotional intelligence, that self-awareness and self-regulation that we as leaders need to know about. We need to know about our impact on our people that we're leading. So in my Leader Six-Pack, I've got 6 baskets of competencies. Yes, those old hard competencies haven't gone away, like strategic thinking, decision making, and financial acumen and so on. But they've also been balanced now, and I bring to the fore actually these EQ traits like humility and empathy, and how they all blend together in a new world is critical. So my Leader Six-Pack breaks into 3 categories. One category is to do with self-leadership, internal leadership. Another category is to do with how we lead the team. And then the third category is how we lead the business. And that's where Dubai Duty Free comes in, who I've been working with since, I think, 2007. An incredible retailer in Dubai, the #1 duty-free retailer in the world. incredibly successful, and much of that success is driven by the fact that the airline, Emirates Airline, is so successful. So their numbers keep going up and up and up and up, which drives traffic through the duty-free store. But they were very keen to get my perspective on leadership, particularly because of my experience working with high street retail. Not just Selfridges, but Harrods and Fortnum and Mason and Fenwick and Ann Summers and many, many other food retailers in Ireland, UK and the Middle East. So by using the Leaders Six-Pack, we were able to help leaders, hundreds of leaders in Dubai duty-free, to raise their game and to be not just task-focused, but to recognize that even the supervisors have a role to play in leading people and maximizing productivity in their people. And again, that's ongoing and another success story. I want to now close towards the last point I want to make, is that with the 7 steps to profit, we know that it's a very, very effective model. There isn't a business professor in the world that would disagree with it. But best of intentions don't always make it through to the front line. They often get diluted, and there's that disconnect. And that's why I have created what I call the CARA 7+ Index. The 7+ Index is an organization health assessment where we're able to give organizations an insight into their business in a way that they would never have been able to afford unless they brought in consultants. This will do this for them in a much, much faster way through AI and our expertise, of course, all coming together. What does it mean? It means that you will be able to get an insight into what you need to dial up or dial down in order to drive profitability. And it also removes the guessing from how you think your messages from the boardroom are making it to the front line or not. Now, we also bring this into some of our speaking. I also bring this into some of my speaking events. Veolia is a recent example. They have a leadership cadre, 25 leaders. And what we did was we got those 25 leaders to complete the organization health assessment before the event. And then when I got the results, I collated them all together to give it like a straw man for Veolia. So in the workshop that started out as a speaking event and turned into a workshop, a full day workshop, I presented the results to this cadre. Now, 2 things happened. 1, they learned about the 7 steps to profit, but also they were able to relate to their scores and make decisions and action plans at the same time. A very, very effective day. Now, just to close off, a couple of things I'd like to say about me, the last word, as it were. So in terms of the events that I speak or facilitate at, yes, I speak at events all around the world, from Auckland right through the Middle East to Europe and wherever else is needed. So sometimes they are speaking events and other times they are workshops. Again, it depends entirely on what you're trying to do with your event. Industries, I'm agnostic. You can see the white hair. After 30 years, there isn't an industry that I haven't worked in. And my models, frameworks and tools, I promise, will work in any sector, any organization of any size. My approach to speaking is a little bit different. So first of all, once I get briefed from you and you tell me what you're trying to, the method you're trying to land at the event, I then ask you to give me the names of 3 delegates who will be at the event. Why? Because I genuinely want to tailor the content for you. Rather than just coming along with a generic presentation that I might have delivered to a few people last week and the week before, I genuinely want to tailor my content to you. How do I do that? I want it to resonate. I want to build rapport with your audience so they know that effort has been made and that whatever they listen to from me is absolutely relevant to today and their real life challenges. So that's it. I interview 2 or 3 people in advance. We don't mention them on the day. That's private between that person and me. And whatever I learn, I just pull it all together, and that helps me then to enrich the content to make it even more relevant. That ensures a practical outcome, I promise you. The last takeaway I'd like you to just take from this. All of your ambitions, whatever you are trying to do, there is a culture element to that, because culture touches every part of your organization. Everything that you're trying to do, not just in your event, but behind that, also involves change to some degree. And of course, everything that you do should also focus on the customer. Now, as I said to you already, I deliver keynotes on all of these topics. But let me tell you, they all 3 appear in every presentation to varying degrees. Obviously, if you want me to focus on change, I will do that, but culture and customer comes into that too. Or if you want me to focus on customer, I'll major in customer, but behind that, I'll make points about the importance of culture and change in getting to that consistent, great customer service ethos. And then, as I said to you already, finally, landing your message requires a truly bespoke keynote. And by interviewing a few people in advance, that will certainly make a big difference. I'm known for being practical and commercial. So rather than being a futurist or a motivational speaker that is flying at 30,000 feet and with big ideas, yes, I have the big ideas, but I really do want to break that complexity down to simplicity. So after my delivery, my promise to you is that your people will leave with ideas that they can put into practice the very next day. So thank you for listening. I am launching a podcast, so please do watch out for my podcast series called Boardroom Insights, which I'm taking the opportunity to interview C-level executives from around the world to get their perspective on what goes on in the boardroom, what challenges they have, how they overcome them, and so on. I hope to work with you someday, and let's keep in touch. Thanks again for listening.